when you look at the story of vaccines in these early decades of the 2020s, you start to see something deeper than announcements or scientific charts. You start to notice a truth about who we are and who we're trying to be. Because on one hand, we've made remarkable progress, breakthroughs in mRNA, real-time safety monitoring, tools that would have seemed like science fiction when I was a kid. And on the other hand, we're still wrestling with fear, with access, with the corrosive effects of misinformation that can spread faster than any virus. It's a reminder that knowledge alone isn't enough. Trust has to follow. And if we're honest with ourselves, trust is fragile. It's built slowly, lost quickly, and earned through choices that put the public good above convenience or politics. So the question for each of us, standing here in this moment of extraordinary possibility and sobering responsibility, is simple. What kind of society do we want to be when the next challenge arrives? The story of vaccines in 2025 doesn't begin with this year. It stretches back through years of global anxiety, moments of triumph, and countless late nights in labs where scientists pushed the boundaries of what's possible. In the aftermath of pandemics, societies had to confront not just pathogens, but the lingering scars left on their institutions, their economies, and their faith in one another. And as new variants emerged, as climate change shifted patterns of disease, as technology leapt forward with AI-powered surveillance systems and rapid approvals, the world was forced to adapt. We saw incredible courage, health workers serving on the front lines, regulators racing against time, communities stepping up to get protected. But we also saw inequity, regions left behind, access determined by geography or wealth, and people struggling to tell the difference between sound science and manipulative noise. Still, within that struggle, you could sense something more enduring, a belief that protecting one another is not just a scientific effort, but a moral one. A recognition that the promise of these tools is inseparable from the values we attach to them: equity, transparency, responsibility. And through each turning point, progress wasn't measured only in doses delivered, but in the slow rebuilding of confidence and the steady reaffirmation of our shared humanity. When I was organizing on the south side of Chicago, I learned early on that trust doesn't come from titles or suits or podiums. It comes from showing up consistently, humbly, ready to listen. And the same is true in public health. In the Oval Office, I was reminded of that every time we faced a crisis. There's no magic button, no shortcut. You lean on experts, you ask hard questions, and you keep the focus where it belongs, on the lives behind the numbers. I remember talking with researchers who had spent decades dreaming about vaccines that adapt in real time, that respond to emerging threats with speed we'd never imagined. For most folks, that kind of ambition stays invisible, buried behind screens and lab doors. But I've seen the patience it requires, the setbacks, the quiet persistence, and I've also seen the confusion that spreads when technology moves faster than understanding. So when I hear people today grappling with whether they can trust these advancements, I don't dismiss that concern. I've lived through the moments when communication failed, when politics drowned out clarity, and when fear filled the silence. But I've also seen what happens when communities lead, when neighbors help neighbors, when local leaders step up, when information is shared with humility instead of condescension. And every time, progress followed, not because government commanded it, but because people chose it together. What this moment teaches us is that science can carry us far, but not all the way. Human nature, our hopes, our doubts, our instinct to protect the people we love will always shape how we respond to new discoveries. That's why leadership matters. Not leadership defined by authority, but by responsibility. The responsibility to be transparent even when the truth is complicated, to act with urgency without cutting corners, to balance individual freedom with our obligation to safeguard one another. Democracy itself depends on that balance because every vaccination campaign, every breakthrough, every act of public health is ultimately a collective choice. It asks us to recognize that the fate of a child in another neighborhood or another country is tied to our own, and it reminds us that progress is rarely dramatic, it's incremental, sometimes frustrating, often slow. But when courage guides our decisions, when empathy shapes our policies, when we meet uncertainty with honesty instead of fear, the arc bends toward justice, toward dignity, toward a world where preventable diseases no longer define our destiny. That's not wishful thinking. That's the result of millions of quiet acts of responsibility carried out over years by people whose names most of us will never know. So, as we look at vaccine updates in 2025, at new tools, new challenges, and new possibilities, we're really looking at ourselves, at what we value, at the kind of world we want to build. Because health is not a privilege, it's the foundation on which lives are lived and dreams take shape. And every dose, every breakthrough, every step forward is a testament to the choices we've made and the obligations we carry. The future isn't guaranteed, it never has been, but it's shaped by the decisions we make now in all their complexity and consequence. And so I find myself wondering, are we willing to meet this moment with clarity and compassion? Will we choose trust over fear, responsibility over convenience, community over isolation? And when history looks back on 2025, will it see a society that rose to protect one another or one that turned away?